V's on the show with me now. Welcome back to the Terrace, bro. Congrats on the win. What you saying, brother?
Hey man, thanks for having me on. I'm feeling good about this win. Early mornings, they can always be a little jammy. Well, the early mornings for me, the early games for you guys out there. But no, I'm happy with the performance. 100%. Like Pep deciding to sit KDB and Silva, like that's an impressive bench when you really think about it. So I was happy with how they played. We expected Everton to play low block and defensive and be sound because again, they're playing away at the Etihad, so it was going to be a difficult game. All in all, we just have to play these games one game at a time because we know it's going to be a three-horse race. Liverpool ain't going anywhere despite playing terribly against Arsenal. And Arsenal showed that they're legit and that they're going to be fierce to the very end, I think, this season, learning from last season, with how they performed against Liverpool. So we just need to get these wins. And if Pep can play these games and not have the strongest 11 every time, I think that's going to be great rotation for us to be ready when the games get so congested because it's going to be Champions League, FA Cup, league games. So I'm happy with what I saw, man. And Haaland, I think you mentioned it earlier. He hasn't been playing over a month plus. I don't know how many games are registered, but the guy is still the top goal scorer. Like it's absolutely crazy. I think it's 38 games, 35 goals, something ridiculous like that. So man's nasty, and we just need to feed the big man. Just feed the big man. And KDB is the only guy that releases the passes early and gives him a chance to get onto them. Everyone else, unfortunately, holds the ball a little too long. And credit to KDB because no one has the skill set. But if we just release the ball more, especially in this game before KDB came on, Haaland could get on those chances or make it difficult for defenses. When we're ready and we're getting there, we're going to be unstoppable. Thanks for the credit, saying we're the best in the world right now, but we're not playing at our best, and that's scary.
Yeah, look, I think from my sort of perspective, I kind of look at the situation and just think to myself, look, you are the best team, and I still think there's levels within it. You are right about the Haaland situation. In the last game I watched against Brentford, first half today, there's times he's making runs and the players on the ball just don't even think about making the pass. They don't have the vision to make that pass. Foden would if he was the one in possession, but nobody else does. And I think that, Doku was trying his best today. It just wasn't quite coming off for him, but he was nice and direct. But the amount of times he's making those runs and the ball isn't coming, I think if you guys are countering in the second half for his second goal, and that isn't KDB on the ball, they play the more simple pass out to, I think it might have been Grealish, who was wide on the left. The pass goes out to whoever's on the left because it's simpler, it's easier than maintaining possession. And I actually saw Rants and Bants. I saw a reel of his today where he was talking about Bruno Fernandes and KDB and essentially saying they're not good footballers. They just spam the ball into areas looking for assists. They're chasing stats. They're chasing stats as opposed to trying to play football because their pass completion rate's often like low 80s, high 70s. And I look at it and think, but I understand the analysis, but where I politely disagree is KDB wasn't looking to get an assist today. He was looking for you guys to score a goal and kill the game off. It just so happens that you get an assist. And what you didn't have in that first half was somebody in possession who was consistently trying to break the lines. Everything was very simple. Everything was to feet. Everything enabled Everton to sit in their low block and be hard to break down. KDB comes on, and I know your first goal doesn't directly happen from a KDB situation, but it gets teams nervous because they know suddenly there's going to be crosses and balls. I wouldn't use the word spamming. I think that it's disrespectful to his skill set. They know there's going to be passes being surgically placed in dangerous areas of the box, and that's what KDB brings. As great as he is on the ball, as great as he is with his skill set, that ability to find people in dangerous areas is a world-class talent which is finite. It's hard to find.
So this is the thing, and respect to Rance, but the comparison between Bruno and KDB, first of all, should never be done because the approach to the game is very different. KDB, again, it's not a spamming, it's not volume. It's seeing that a release pass here puts the defense under pressure. So it's not like he's just winging it. It's not like he's just putting it into space. He sees a run by the player and he puts it there. Now, when it comes down to other players doing something like KDB, I'm not going to see it. I'm not going to see it. And I've been blessed. I've been blessed to have amazing midfielders, but I haven't seen anyone release passes like KDB. So I don't expect it from anyone else, even when we have a Rodri or a Silva or in Foden in the middle. And to start the game, we had Alvarez. That's not his skill set. Alvarez has an amazing nose for goal, and I think he plays well in terms of tandem, but he's not going to be creative that way. So I'm not going to kill him for it because I think Pep, again, he's putting these players into not their best positions to see whether they can deliver on what he's asking. Foden, we've already seen it. Foden's better centrally, but he played out wide today, and obviously that gave Bernardo Silva some rest. We didn't play Grealish. So I think Pep is doing the rotation, and he's putting players not in the best not in the best positions for them, but the best case for the team. What I want from KDB is exactly what he's doing. If rivals want to say he's just the numbers guy, he spams, cool. I want that quality at my team.
Mate, I agree with you, right? So listen, I think KDB is better than Bruno. There was a time where, I was pushing the Bruno agenda and saying, a bit of that was rivalry. A bit of that was the numbers were just so amazing. But they're both similar in the sense of you can call it spamming in the numbers game. And that's actually what halftime hooks here says is KDB is definitely volume, similar to Trent. He just has quality in his volume, but that's just it. In my team, I want there to be a player or two who are attempting through balls and crosses and dinked passes and whatever phrases you want to use, attempting to break a line and put the ball into a goal scoring position. I want someone that's attempting that regularly. If you don't, then what you get, if you don't have someone that does that, you end up like the back end era of Arsene Wenger's Arsenal, where you're trying to pass the ball into the back of the net. When you're trying to pass the ball into the back of the net and you're actually not creating those gilt-edged chances. It's like, we're going to wait for the most opportune moment to square the ball so it's a tap in. But that isn't always possible. Sometimes do you know what? I'm 25 yards away. I could knock that ball into that channel. It gets cut back and there could be a tap in on. It's more direct. It's a little bit uglier. I'm not saying Pep's football's ugly. It's a little bit uglier when you do it, when the first 3 or 4 don't come off. But you've got to play that volumes game, especially when you're up against a low block, especially when everybody's behind the ball. So I don't really understand why there is a criticism of what KDB, what Trent Alexander-Arnold, what Bruno Fernandes does. And by the way, I think if Bruno 5 years ago joined City or joins Liverpool or a team that's brilliant, I don't think he'd be as disliked as he is now and would have delivered even more. But listen, as I got a lot of respect for Rance. I agree with a lot of his football takes. He's a nice guy as well. I've met him a number of occasions, but I see a lot of people talk about, KDB just spams it into the box. I sort of sit there and think, I'm so glad this generation weren't around for proper wingers because their job was to get to the byline and cross it into the box. Not once in the history of football was David Beckham considered a spammer who got to the byline and crossed the ball into the box. It's part of your job. It's like saying, it's like having a go at a goalkeeper that makes saves. It's just his job. He's meant to do it. And do you know how you know it's KDB's job? Because if a player was attempting all those crosses and passes and it wasn't part of Pep's plan, you'd be dragged off the pitch. It wouldn't play you. It wouldn't play you. So it's. I understand the analysis, but I think it's misunderstood.
And it's too simplistic. It's too simplistic because there's also the level of crosses that he makes, like the height of the ball, where he's placing it, far post, near post. Like it's not just I'm just putting it up there and see whether a player can get onto it. But I want to speak earlier when you mentioned Doku. Like Doku's figuring it out, but how he attacks the defender, I'm all for. I'm all for that because that's creating opportunities where another defender either has to shift position or now you have a threat where you need to find where Haaland is or find where the far post is and cover up. Yeah, the final delivery isn't quite there, but the fact that he's getting there, we need that. And again, that's the difference between what we get from a Grealish and what we get from a Doku. I want both players because I need that adjustment that Pep can do depending on how we're being defended against. But Doku's skill set and his trickery, there's a reason why in the market we're going out and we're getting some wingers with pace and a little bit of that shiftiness because we need that against certain defenses. This block today, we would have been so frustrated had it been Jack, I believe, how the game started. Because there wouldn't have been KDB on that pitch either. So Jack, Alvarez, and Haaland kind of playing within this low block, I think we would have been even more frustrated because Jack doesn't have that trickery. The dynamic of Doku, much needed. Much needed. He's a good player. He just needs a little more time.
Yeah, I think he's a sensational player. And listen, people don't think I rate Jack Grealish. I know I gave him a nickname of Luke Chadwick. It was a bit of a joke. It's not serious. I think he's a tremendously talented footballer. But I look at Phil Foden, and I think Phil Foden is ahead of him because the outputs are there and more consistent. I look at Doku, and I think both Foden and Doku, Mahrez when he was there, for me, debunk the myth that when Grealish is on the pitch, he's told to not be direct, to not take people on, to not try and score an assist, but to stay wide and to create space for others. And the reason I don't believe that to be the true case, in certain times of the game, he'll do that. Of course he will. But for the idea for that to be the overarching main tactic, and that's why it's okay for his numbers to be so low, I've always pushed back against that. Because if that was the case, why is he only asking Jack Grealish to do it, but then not when the other guys are on the pitch? Now, I understand if you're bringing these guys on for Jack late, they're going to be more direct. But when they start the games, they're as direct. And for me, that's where Grealish, for me, is just, listen, he's a phenomenally talented footballer who's got a lot of great assets that have helped your club. But I look at Doku, I look at Foden, the way they play, and I just think if you can find a way where you've got those guys on either side, or you add somebody else onto that right-hand side in the summer, that directness is so important for Haaland, because you'll find eventually what Doku's going to start doing is finding Haaland with these cutbacks, and then it's just even more goals coming in,
100%, 100%. And like, I also wanted to, I tweeted this. I said, listen, we're seeing what life might be like without KDB and Bernardo Silva, because they didn't start today, and it's not looking good, guys. Like, it's not looking good if this is how we're going to be set up without a KDB and Bernardo Silva. I don't think that would be the case. I think Foden would be brought centrally, but this game in particular against teams that are going to defend like this, we showed why. We showed why those players have been so important. Rodri, KDB, Silva. Like, this is an era where I've heard you in the past talk about the players that have been so impactful. I'm gonna hold my hand up and be like, this has been some of the best, most consistent football I've ever seen because of KDB, Silva, and Rodri in that team. And we're not Rodri FC, don't get me wrong, but when we didn't have those players, in particular, when we had to face like Arsenal or early in the season and things of that nature, when we don't have that quality, we're not going to be as good as some of the other teams like Liverpool.
And the thing is, me and Lee Gunner have had this conversation before. For instance, right now, how many players are there that can do what KDB does and do what Bernardo Silva does? And generally in the world, how many midfielders do you know are as consistent, as strong, have the dictatorship skills and creativity skills of those two? Like, generally, how many? Not to name them, but how many players are at that level in your opinion in the world?
If a player like KDB, I'd actually say there's none. A player like Silva, 2, maybe 3.
And I agree. It's always going to be 1 or 2 at that level. So when you have a number of players of that ilk, when they leave, sometimes it's just about perfect timing or bad timing. So sometimes if players of that equal quality are already in big contracts at big clubs, you're not getting anybody as good. Sometimes you have an individual that's leaving, and your timing for Haaland was perfect because Aguero leaves, you try to get Kane, doesn't happen, then you get Erling Haaland. If, for instance, for whatever reason, you'd have got Harry Kane. Now, Harry Kane will still be scoring a lot of goals, there's no doubt, but you wouldn't have him. The point is that sometimes it's just about the timing. So when you lose Bernardo Silva and KDB, say it is this summer for one reason or another, there is a high probability chance that whoever comes in isn't going to be as good. Therefore, you won't be as good. And that isn't because of bad recruiting or bad planning. That's simply because you built a team with some of the best players in the world. So the only way after that is down for a while until, and even the great Real Madrid teams, Liverpool teams, Bayern Munich teams, that's why there's always ebbs and flows in how good you are. And it's why you've got to enjoy every single season when you're winning, every single goal, every single moment, because there will be a dip. Now, I'm not saying the dip is going to be, you're going to fall down to 8th in the league, but the dip might just be second a few times and whatever else it may be. It's really hard when absolute superstars leave your football club, especially now with so many clubs having money and even the smaller clubs having cash. They don't need to let everybody go. I think it was maybe easier in the 70s, 80s, 90s, where the top 3 or 4 teams in the world could just go, right, we're losing this guy, we're going to go and buy the of that level. It was a lot easier, I think. So there's a super chat here from Akash that says Branthwaite is an excellent prospect. Get him moved to Man United and bring him to Old Trafford. City weren't at their best today, but again, KDB proving the difference. I agree with all parts of that. I think Braithwaite is an excellent prospect, but you guys, how do you think the response will be now from Liverpool and Liverpool this weekend? Liverpool and Arsenal, sorry, this weekend.
Liverpool have probably the best matchup to face after a poor loss to Arsenal. They're playing Burnley, and shout out to my man Company, but I think Liverpool are going to have the response that they want. It'll erase the poor performance that they had against Arsenal. Arsenal in particular, that's going to be a very important game, but I think they know that they can't have a win. They can't bring themselves back into the title race contention and then drop off and have a loss. So I think both teams get a win, and I think it's going to be like that until well, you know what? Liverpool have the easier fixture list overall, but they're in Europa playing on those Thursdays. So it's going to be interesting how both or all managers manage player rotation and who decides to sacrifice what. Arsenal don't. They've got Champions League, so they don't really have to make too many decisions. But there's going to be a time where Pep's going to have to decide FA Cup, League, Champions League. What am I kind of prioritizing based off of this week? And the same goes for Liverpool in their Europa, FA Cup, and league play.
Yeah, it's going to be it's certainly going to be an interesting one. It really, really is. And I think we're in for one hell of a title race. And I kind of wanted City to drop points today, not even from a United point perspective, purely because I think it makes the title race even more exciting. What